Do you see India as a dead economy?
It's the world's fastest growing economy. A testament to that fact is that the EU and India is negotiating a free trade agreement. I think that will be mutually beneficial. So certainly from a Danish, a European perspective, we see India as a very promising place to invest and do business with. But that would not be the case if it was a dead economy.
Free trade agreement has been under negotiation from I think more than a decade now.
Negotiating for so long was a certain lack of urgency, but I think the urgency is there now. We are close to reaching a deal, and I remain confident.
Do you see this happening globally, that unless you stand up for your rights and if you don't have that bully pulpit, you really cannot even negotiate on trade?
We are in favor of a rules-based international order where it's not a question of the big players just dictating what small players should do.
We have heard this term that India is a very high tariff country. How does EU and Denmark look at this point?
India is a very big economy and therefore also an attractive place to invest. And if you have high tariffs, of course, the alternative is you come here and you manufacture in India.
What is EU take on that, our position with Russia? We are buying oil from there and we share a very good relationship.
Whatever country that clearly aids and abets Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, we would remain critical of.
European Union countries buy oil from Russia, that is okay. Or they buy gas from Russia, that is okay. But when India buys, why it is different? Why there are two rules?
No, it's
This episode is powered by easemytrip.com. Namaste, Jai Hind. You're watching or listening to another edition of the ENA podcast with Smita Prakash. My guest today is the Denmark ambassador to India, Rasmus Kristensen. Although Denmark is a relatively small member state of the European Union, it punches above its weight because of its strategic geography, strong economy, and diplomatic influence. For India, Denmark's role inside the EU matters because it can act as a policy ally and entry point to the wider European market. And with America's tariffs hitting the world, everyone is grappling with the new normal. I'm joined in this podcast by my colleague, Naveen Kapoor. Ambassador, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. I want to talk about India-Denmark, of course, but before that, the breaking news, the latest salvo that has hit us and scores of other countries as well, which is American tariffs. But the American president has very odd term. He used the term dead economy for India. You're posted here in New Delhi. Do you see India as a dead economy?
No, I certainly do not see India as a dead economy. On the contrary, it's the world's fastest growing economy, and I think a testament to that fact is that the EU and India is negotiating a free trade agreement. I think that will be mutually beneficial. So certainly from a Danish, a European perspective, we see India as a very promising place to invest and do business with, and that would not be the case if it was a dead economy.
Sir, free trade agreement has been under negotiation from I think more than a decade now. So do you think this time we will be able to meet the deadline? Like they have announced that they will complete it by the year end.
And you have the presidency, so...
Yes.
Indeed, Denmark currently holds the rotating presidency of the European Union, although when it comes to trade policy, as we discussed, it's a responsibility of the EU Commission. But I think we do see very significant momentum now in the negotiations between the EU and India. Probably for all kinds of reasons. Certainly, the EU is very interested in also diversifying its trade relationships. And India there is an important player, and I think the same goes for India. So maybe the reason why we have been negotiating for so long was a certain lack of urgency, but I think the urgency is there now. And whether we can conclude it by during our presidency in say November, December, or whether it comes slightly later, nobody knows. But I think we are close to reaching a deal, and I remain confident that.
But I think it's a record of sorts. 17 years. I think its negotiations are going on.
Yeah, but we've seen similar kind of negotiations with many other countries. But I think the urgency now after the American tariff regime is all the more. You're seeing articles in Indian media saying that we have to look at other markets. We have to, because American tariffs. Do you see the same kind of urgency in EU member nations that we have to look outside of America? And do you see retaliatory tariffs happening on America at all? How much is the tariff on EU?
On the EU, it will be 15%, and a deal has been reached. So, of course, there will be no retaliatory tariffs after that. That's the agreement. Needless to say, from both a Danish and a European perspective, I think we are firm believers in free trade and think that is beneficial to both the EU and to our partners around the world, and are certainly not in favor of raising tariffs. But this is a deal that has been agreed upon, and we will stick to that. I think in general that's what characterizes the EU. We are a reliable, predictable partner, and much prefer that to the opposite. And hopefully India will also come to both see us and come to see us as a reliable, predictable partner. That as soon as you reach an agreement, this is what we stick to, and we'll keep that.
What could India learn from how you negotiated with the US? Was it like prudence over defiance? Is that what worked for you guys?
Well, I don't know what exactly has been the strategic and tactical considerations when you negotiate, but of course I think as always in these cases it's about sort of making sure that the perfect doesn't become the enemy of the good, and that you remain sort of realistic about what can be achieved, that you are confident that you have certain red lines that cannot be crossed. Needless to say, that's certainly the case for the EU. But on the other hand, we also need to reach an agreement. So, and that would be the same in any sort of international negotiations. Of course, I think when it comes to the EU's relationships with other partners, I mean, needless to say, the EU is a very, very big economy, right? And so we have leverage too, and therefore, it's not it would not necessarily be beneficial to anyone to end up with very high tariffs. But of course, the question is where do you set the bar, right? And I think in Europe, a lot of people would say, it would have been great if this deal could have been better, in the sense that we could have lower tariffs, as was the case before. But on the other hand, this is what could be achieved, and that's perfectly fine.
Okay. Ambassador, we have heard this term that India is a very high tariff country. How does EU and Denmark look at this point?
Yeah, President Trump says this.
Is it actually a high tariff country? Like, is it charging extraordinary tariffs, over the roof tariffs?
Well, it's not for me to say what is a high tariff. I mean, countries have tariffs because sometimes they also want to protect their own industries, and I actually understand that argument. If you do the opposite, you can also risk being naive, and you will be completely swamped by cheap goods from other countries, and therefore I think it's more a question of getting it right. Because on the other hand, if you have very high tariffs on various products, then sometimes you also cushion your own domestic industries to a point where they actually are not or does not become globally competitive. So that's the balance to strike. But I think overall, certainly there are areas where I think, and I can say that also from Danish exporters, where we would have liked to see perhaps lower tariffs in India. But at the same time, India is a very big economy, and therefore also an attractive place to invest. And if you have high tariffs, of course, the alternative is you come here and you manufacture in India, right?
Because as you said, I have also learned from some reports that EU is also demanding India to lower the tariffs on cars and other products. So do you share the same view what US shares?
No, again, I don't think it's. I mean, I don't know what the US has. They have their arguments. I'll leave it at that. But certainly from a European perspective, I think if you want to have a trade agreement, it has to be mutually beneficial, and that means that we will lower tariffs for Indian products coming into the EU, and India will do the same for us. And that's the whole idea of comparative advantages. That there are certain things that can be cheaper produced here in India, and therefore we would benefit from importing stuff to the EU. But there would also, in fairness, be products that are perhaps better produced or of a higher quality, or what I know, in Europe, and that would benefit the Indian consumers. So they would get access to high quality, cheaper products than if you did not have the tariffs. Because let's not forget, and this is something a little bit overlooked in this discussion on tariffs, who pays in the end? It's the consumers. And of course, whether they like it or not, the American consumers will pay. eventually for some of this, right? And that also goes for the Europeans, and of course here in India. So Indian consumers also pay when you have higher tariffs if they want access to certain products. So that's always the trade-off, right?
In India, it's also the protection for the Indian factory worker and the Indian farmer. You know, it's domestic issues come into play. But when it comes to India-US, there's also politics overriding it. I think that was visible even when it was EU and America dealing with it. I'll just read out a quote. It was Macron who said on July 30th, "To be free, you need to be feared," when he said, "And we are not feared enough." Do you see this happening globally, that unless you stand up for your rights and if you don't have that bully pulpit, you really cannot even negotiate on trade, forget about anything else?
Well, I personally think, and that's also the Danish take on this, that we are in favor of a rules-based international order where it's not a question of the big players just dictating what small players should do. The whole idea of the European Union is the opposite, and therefore when we negotiate as a matter of principle, it happens in good faith. We are trying to reach, for example, an agreement with India that would be mutually beneficial and not something based on our economic power enforcing you to do something that you would not like to do.
So you don't read the tea leaves on the India-US situation.
But my point is that it's clear that of course we are in a global situation where power still matters, and I think certainly in Europe we have also come to realize that sometimes maybe we also need to use the leverage we have, which comes with a continental-sized single market economy with 420 million consumers, a very large economy dominating certain high-tech sectors. So we can also use that to our advantage in negotiations with whomever, right? But I think the European idea is still that whenever we engage and negotiate, we do it in good faith to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. We're not pushing some countries to do things they don't like. That's contrary to the European idea. Yeah.
Ambassador, in the recent developments, we are basically penalized that because we were dealing with Russia. What is EU take on that, our position with Russia? We are buying oil from there and we share a very good relationship. Some of the European countries have also blamed India for fueling the war by buying the oil from them. So what is your take on that, sir?
In continuation of what he said, there is a demand continuously, and been an ongoing demand for decades for India to decouple from Russia. And Indians feel that, and most Indians don't see it as a justified demand. And for us, for India, non-alignment has now become an expensive thing. The cost has increased for India's non-aligned status. To continue with what he said,
but maybe let me try to flip that question a little bit, in the sense that after the terror attack in Pahalgam, India, of course, sought the support from a number of countries around the world, including Denmark, including other European countries, the US, what have you, because you justifiably thought that you had been attacked, in this case by terrorists, and with certain links to maybe other places, but there was the Indian view, which I perfectly both understand and sympathize with, because you found that an existential question, right? You were attacked. And I think what has to be emphasized here when it comes to the question of Russia and Ukraine is that from a European perspective, Russia's, invasion of a sovereign country, nobody disputes, not even India, nobody disputes that Ukraine is a sovereign country, member of the United Nations, protected by the UN Charter, was attacked by another country. And there could be complex reasons for that, but they were attacked by another country blatantly, violation of any principles in the UN Charter. And of course, from a European's perspective, this becomes existential to us, because who will be the next country if you can just do that? If you can just invade another country, who will be next? So for us, this is a matter of national security, and we think that of course Russia should be sanctioned for what it did and continues to do in Ukraine, enormous casualties on both sides. And therefore, whomever aids and abets the Russian war in Ukraine, it's not something we condone or necessarily like. Of course, I understand that the issue of energy is complex, and there are certain rules also guiding that. But of course, we are concerned when we see goods, necessary for the Russian war economy coming into Russia from other places. When we see Russia's shadow fleet coming to India with oil, these are ships that are not registered, typically not even you cannot see where they are on the map, and they're not insured. You can reach all kinds of environmental disasters coming out of that. So all this, of course, we are critical of. But I think ultimately this is about understanding that the war in Ukraine for Europe is existential. It's a matter of national security for us. We fear what will come next. And I think that's not too different from what you expect from other countries when it came to the attack in Pahalgam. Right?
But sir, Mr. Jaishankar has stated that when European Union countries buy oil from Russia, that is okay. Or they buy gas from Russia, that is okay. But when India buys, why it is different? Why there are two rules?
No, that's a fair point, and again, we are not necessarily saying that you cannot buy oil from Russia. I mean, again, it's about what's the benchmark price and what are the sanctions rules that have been implied. But it's also clear that when it comes to Europe, then you can see our dependence on Russian energy has gone down to a very low point, whereas so that's. We are trying to get out of it, and we are almost there. So I think that's a point I want to make.
And there's a question of China-Russia access too. And for long, it was seen that India would be that bridge to see that the bear and the dragon don't get together. And now suddenly it's inconsequential. So it's such a dynamic situation. How does EU see that, the juxtaposition of India out here with China and Russia and that axis is now this tariff regime, is it pushing, does the EU see it as pushing India closer to China and Russia?
I don't think we there's any sort of firm position on that, but needless to say, we are of course both critical and skeptical from a Danish perspective of and the increased sort of alignment between Russia and China, and it's not something we we would like to see. And again, whatever country that clearly aids and abets Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, we would remain critical of. Yeah.
You spoke about Operation Sindoor, and Denmark was among the first few countries which immediately condemned the terror attack. What prompted Denmark to come forward immediately?
Well, I think first of all, important here to recognize that Denmark has always been, staunch in its fight against terrorism. This is something that we have also been struggling with for many years. Back in 2015, we had a terror attack in Copenhagen. I was there at the time, and I remember sort of the fear in the city when you had sort of gunmen running around, not yet caught by the police. Where were they? What was going to happen? So we have tried it ourselves. Our embassy in Islamabad was bombed by a suicide car bomber in 2008, leading to casualties. The first time ever service members of the Danish Foreign Service were killed. So we do have our own experiences with that. We spend a lot of time in Afghanistan and other places, also in a fight against terrorism after the 9/11 bombing. So I think we for many years this has been a very consistent part of Danish foreign policy to speak out against any kind of terrorism. So therefore, of course, when this blatant attack brutal happened in Pahalgam, of course we would be among the first to express our condemnation. Also because we are good friends of India and of course will support you in that matter.
How do you look at Indian response to that attack, sir? That Operation Sindoor. What is your analysis on that, sir?
Yeah, well, I think it's again it's for India to decide what its response should be. I can understand the the shock that this caused in India. This was the biggest terror attacks, at least since the Mumbai bombings. Also, the violence, brutality of it, deliberately targeting civilians and so forth. In that sense, being a little bit different from what we've seen in the years prior to that. So I can certainly understand that India had to react and also react strongly to that attack.
You've called India-Denmark relations as a perfect match. In what way is that synergy working, do you think? And many articles say that 2020 was a benchmark for the relation to go on an upward trajectory. Could you explain a little bit about before 2020 and now, and why you see it as a perfect match?
We've had diplomatic relations for now 75 years and have good trade relations for almost 400 years. So it's we have been long-standing friends. But I think it's correct that in 2020 we sort of entered a new phase in our bilateral relationship, not least by concluding this Green Strategic Partnership. This is the first strategic partnership India has with a country that is, specifically labeled as being green. And I think, of course, now we get to speak about something that's close to my heart, namely the challenge. Despite we can talk about tariffs and terrorism, whatever, but at the end of the day, humanity is facing an even bigger challenge and crisis. Although it's slow, unlike some of the other things we've been talking about, but it will hit us, and the consequences will be even more devastating than anything we can imagine when they already start to appear. So of course, the green transition, sustainability is something that is important to Denmark, but also to India. And I think the current government and before that has made impressive not just ambitions, but also gains in deploying renewable energy and so forth. So in that sense, I think India perhaps rightly saw that Denmark, a very small country, but with unique world-class experience in doing its green transition. And importantly, I think this is a key point here, I think the Danish experience, of course, you can find other countries who have also invested in green technology, whatever. But I think what characterizes our transition now is that it's also come to a point where we would like to show others, or at least make others aware of that what we have done is cost efficient. So, and I think that's maybe also what has interested the Indian side. How do you make this transition in a way that's not going to kill your economy, right? But actually something where you can turn it into your own advantage and become a front runner in green technologies. And then, as the saying goes, maybe Denmark has had certain experiences, certain skills when it comes to that, and India, of course, has a scale.
So there is always a sticking point on the climate strategy and on the way India is dealing with its environment and climate, whether it is the emissions, whether it is the renewable energy, with the solar alliance. How are you looking at the trajectory now? Like, how is India dealing with it? Because a lot of the critics, they are saying that India is not doing its bit in that.
I think India is doing its bit, certainly, in the sense that we also have to recognize and acknowledge the magnitude of the challenge here. Again, India as a country, India as an economy is massive. And of course, you have a right to develop and grow economically, just as any other country would have that right. Of course, the challenge that you now face is you have to grow in a way that is also sustainable. Not just to the benefit of other countries, but first and foremost to the benefit of yourself.
Which is why energy-hungry country.
Yes, you're an energy-hungry country. And that's a fact. So, that's not something we can or should change, in my view. Fortunately, we don't have to. So it's more a question of how to do it, as I see it. That's not something we have to invent here, or, we have the technologies we need. It's all about, getting the right policy framework in place, investing in renewable technologies, integrate them in a cost-efficient manner, and get it done. I think India is making great progress in that, but of course, again, the challenge is enormous. And what we're trying to do then is there some areas where perhaps we have some experiences that could inspire India, that you can take a look and see how you will have to tweak and adapt it to an Indian context, but that might be helpful in that process, ensuring that you can keep growing, but at the same time transition, your energy sector and your economy into a sustainable green economy.
How many Danish companies are invested in India currently, and why do they come to India? One, because of scale, which you mentioned, of course. But beyond that, what are the challenges of working in India for them?
We have a sizable business presence here. It says about over 200 Danish companies with a presence in India. Again, We are a relatively small country with 6 million people in Europe, so 200
That's like one city
plus
probably.
companies here, and we employ well over 100,000 people. This is just what we know for sure, but there is the number is even larger than that. But at least 100,000 people are employed by Danish companies here in India. So,
in what sectors?
So we are in a number of sectors, and we also have world well-known brands I established here with manufacturing and sales offices, whether it's Carlsberg beer or Novo Nordisk doing its helping insulin diabetes patients in India, or within industry, wind power, toys, what have you. So we are in a number of sectors. Now, the reason for being in India, I think, are of course twofold. If you look at the Danish investors, some are here to cater to the Indian market, and I think that's actually the most interesting part, and we see that increasing. So India is growing as an economy, but its domestic market is also becoming increasingly interesting to Danish companies, and some of them have really managed to sort of crack the nut and have become suppliers to Indian industry, some delivering components to industry or whatever, but they manufacture here and they sell to Indian consumers, and they are growing at a decent rate. So that's one. Others, of course, are trying to tap into India's extremely capable tech industry, IT, and so forth. And also that has progressed. I think 20 years ago, some of the companies moving here doing capability centers or like back office functions, that was more sort of bread and butter stuff that was being done in India. No longer the case. Denmark has some of the world's largest engineering advisory service companies.
And your innovative hubs that you have.
Indeed, and they all have a presence here in India. And the interesting thing about that is it's not back office functions being done here; it's real engineering work taking place here. I was surprised, for example, when I went to one of these companies just outside Delhi to see their office with more than 1,000 people working there. And again, it's high world-class engineers. And then I met a couple of engineers who are currently designing a bridge in my own hometown in northern Denmark, right? Sort of very close to my father's house. So that bridge is now being built, designed by engineers here in India, right? So it's absolute state-of-the-art services that are being provided. And that's simply because, for these Danish companies, you can't find enough engineers in Denmark, and even though we also have a lot of, we can come back to that, Indians moving to Denmark to work, and that's all good, but again, it simply wouldn't satisfy the demand. So for growth-oriented Danish companies, India is a very good place to look. So that's the second part. Finally, there are of course some who also here because they manufacture here and export, but that's maybe the little more tricky part, and that comes back to our discussion about trade, because that would of course also require India to have good trade relations with other countries if India should be an export hub, and maybe we're not quite there yet. But the other two reasons are still very dominant. So I remain certainly optimistic about Denmark's business presence here. We'll keep seeing it growing in the years to come. And before coming here, I mean, I've been here 6 months now, but before coming here, I took a round with all the major Danish companies, and I think most of them were quite bullish on India. And some were saying, we are now in the process of devising a new India strategy. Others said, we know we have not performed as well as we should, so now we're looking into, recruiting other people and finding out how we can do it. But it's 5 years ago, my take would be that India would not be something you discussed in the boardrooms back in Copenhagen or other parts of Denmark. Today it is.
Also, one more question I want to add, coming back to the strategic question. EU has always seen India as a counterbalance to China, in the Indo-Pacific and the other areas. Do you see that diluting now with the new developments, US coming in with the tariff and all that? And like India is always seen as a counterbalance to China in the region. So do you still see that?
Again, it can be politically, it can be economically. Of course, Europe is in that sense we're kind of a little bit far away from the Indo-Pacific. But I think if you look at it from a geo-economic perspective, certainly in Europe there is a growing realization that again we need to diversify our economic partnerships. I think in Europe, in the past couple of years, I think we have also come to realize the reliance we have on one country in particular when it comes to imports of certain goods, and we would like to diversify that. Europe will keep trading with China, but we would like to increase our trade with others and make sure that our supply chains are more diversified, that we can get access to goods, manufactured goods, whatever, from different places. And I think, to be very honest, there are very few countries that could deliver what, for example, China has delivered to the global economy. And India is probably the best example of that. So that's why, if you're sitting back in Brussels or in Copenhagen or other European capitals and look out into the world, India is probably the upcoming alternative to what we've seen. So therefore, we will invest here, and but of course, it also requires India to play along and make itself attractive. But the opportunity is there.
Yeah, post-COVID, I think the supply chain issues have come into focus, and that is coming up at all the FTA meetings that India is having about supply chain issues. Taking forward the question on Russia and China, UN Security Council, you're there. Where do you see India's bid in that?
We have been very clear that we are supportive of reforming the UN Security Council, which also means that the participation should be broadened. And we have made it very clear that we support India's bid to have a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. No doubt about that.
Sir, EU has also time and again raised questions about the human rights in India. How do you look at this perspective?
I think first of all, it's important to recognize that Denmark, the European Union, sees India not just as a transactional economic partner, but in fact a country with whom we have we have common values. India's democracy. I think that's fantastic. You have a vibrant, sometimes noisy democracy, but it's a functioning democracy, right? And therefore, of course, when the relationship is also based to some extent or to a large extent on common values, from our perspective, that should also allow us to have frank discussions about how we do things, right? Just as we would welcome India to comment on how you see things in Europe, right? So that doesn't mean that we are overly skeptical about what goes on here, but just as friends, of course, we sometimes we would note certain things with concern, as we would do with many other countries around the world. But I think ultimately we see India as I said, as a partner, and again that's different from other countries, right? As a partner with whom we do transactional deals. No, we see you as a partner with shared values.
So you must be talking to a lot of investors, Danish investors, as you said that before coming here you met them. What is their perspective on India? Is it an improved place to work here?
Ease of doing business.
Ease of doing business is working? And what is also your take on Make in India? Our government is pushing a lot to make things here, to transfer technology here. Now, EU has a lot of high technology, innovative things to share. Yeah. But I think there is some kind of a reluctance in some of the countries to share the technology or to make and manufacture here. So what is your take on that, sir?
Well, first of all, I think Danish companies do recognize, and so do we, that the government here in India has worked hard on improving, the business environment. So ease of doing business has improved considerably over the years. However, of course, it doesn't mean that there are not still, challenges or problems, and it also differs a little bit from state to state in India. But overall, it has improved. However, Danish companies, of course, still have some, concerns when it comes to investing here, and there are some certain themes. One of them is a bit of a technical issue, but it has to do with so-called quality control orders. So that's basically standards for products that are being imported into India that has to be verified in a very cumbersome way. And I think what that illustrates is not so much the technicalities of it, but what it illustrates is that, and maybe something
bureaucracy.
Yeah, but something maybe India also needs to understand that if you want to become a global manufacturing hub, it has to be done it's not something you can just achieve overnight by saying you just come here, right? You have to understand that in the global economy, the supply chains are incredibly complex. And let me give you an example. So you have Danish companies, some of them I know extremely well, that manufacture here in India. It's not what I would call sort of fake manufacturing. And some foreign companies do that, where they just, They import some
Assemble.
stuff. Yeah, they assemble or they just package it more or less. So that's fake manufacturing. Here we're talking about real manufacturing, right? Yeah, you build things more or less from scratch. However, when you build things and you manufacture things, you still need components. You need any piece of, say, industrial machinery or whatever complex product, air conditioner, where Danish companies operate, or pumps, or what I know, they consist of thousands of parts that are put together. And not all of these can be procured locally in India. You have to import them. So if you want this kind of advanced manufacturing, you also need to allow these companies to import what they need in terms of sub-supplies and in a way that is easy and unbureaucratic, right? Because otherwise it simply stops.
Yeah.
And I think that's what some countries, and I could cite a country like Vietnam, has been very good at in attracting industry, is exactly because they make that process very speedy and efficiently. Of course, the ambition should be, and I fully recognize that all these sub-supplies over time should come from India. Of course, that you have a size of your economy so big that should be possible. But I think what the Indian government needs to realize is that to get there, probably takes 10 years. And in the meantime, you need to find a way where you encourage it and you push it. So there has to be nudged. I also concur with that. But if you make almost a wall so that these companies can not import the sub-supplies or make it very difficult for them to import the sub-supplies they need, they're going to look elsewhere. Because globally, and Denmark is a small open economy, I know the boardrooms in Denmark, the companies, and when they look out in the world, they do look at where do we get the best rate of return. And they have many options. Should I manufacture it in Vietnam? Should I do it in India? Should I do it in Latin America? Where should I go, right? And they're very sort of cold-hearted about that. And India is super attractive, but still, I mean, the business proposition has to be in a way that is at least as good as what you would find elsewhere. And that's where, of course, your scale kicks in. That's a huge selling point. But if it gets too bureaucratic and complicated, especially if you are here to export to others, then you look elsewhere.
So what next in India-Danish relationship?
Yeah,
So
if you were to just pick 5 pillars
Yeah.
As to what you expect in your tenure, what are you looking for?
As I said, I think we back in 2020 we engaged, we entered into a new phase in our bilateral relationship. It was certainly elevated with this Green Strategic Partnership, which I think largely has been successful. We have built up a lot of, we have built up quite a bit of cooperation in a number of areas that is, doing fine. As I said, we have a thriving business community here. So in that sense, all is good. So I guess the question now comes, what is the 2.0 version of that? How do we take it to the next level? And I think that's certainly the ambition from my perspective. When our Prime Minister last met Prime Minister Modi, the two leaders agreed that we would aim to elevate this strategic partnership to a comprehensive strategic partnership in the years to come. And I think that's really the key. And what do we mean by comprehensive? I think we mean that it will cover, plethora of sectors. So it's not just one or two things. It really is. It's across.
Broad spectrum.
It's broad spectrum. It's across the board. But also more importantly, that we scale up some of the things we do so that we really move the needle, and that we have also gotten so close to each other that we can do business and we can cooperate in areas that are perhaps more, what shall I say? That requires more trust. And I think we are certainly both willing and capable of doing that.
Okay.
So I think that's the next level. So that would take us into areas like high tech. It would emerging techs, for example, or whatever. And it would also mean that in some of the cooperation we already do on clean tech or whatever, we try to scale it up and achieve more volume
On energy, especially.
On energy, especially. Yeah, we already see
clean energy.
Yeah, see massive investments, but we will do more of that. So I think in terms of sectors, you say, should I mention 3 to 5? I think the 3 most promising ones where I think Denmark has something that you cannot get elsewhere, or at least you can only get in a few other places, and where Denmark should be really attractive is of course energy. We're already helping you now with developing offshore wind as a new promising energy technology. Again, you're a power-hungry country, so it's not a question of should you do nuclear or or wind or solar. You will have to do
Everything.
it all, except the fossil fuels. That has to come down. But everything else you need to invest in, and we can help you with some of those technologies. So I think that's one. Energy is one. Water is another one. Denmark is a major power when it comes to water management, water technology, and we're the only country partner to the Rejuvenation mission and so on. So that we will scale up as well.
Are you cleaning Ganga and Yamuna here?
And that as well. We have a smart lab in Varanasi that are started.
Can you tell us about that, because that is a very important issue here. How do you do that? How are you planning to do that?
Yeah, let me come back to it, because I'll just to for the listeners maybe quickly run through the other two, and then I think the maritime sector is another one where Denmark is a world leader. We have some of the world's largest shipping companies, and in India, there for them will become very interesting going forward. Both again the size of your economy, so this is a place you will ship goods in and out of, as well as logistics inside India. But in the future, India, I suspect will become a hub also for shipbuilding, for scrapping ships, for a lot of things. So they will come and invest, and this is an area for us to cooperate. On top of that, of course, we will do healthcare, we will do food and agriculture, we will do science, technology, and so forth. But those three, I think, are areas where we have something unique to offer India, and I think India understands that.
Cleaning of rivers here is a big challenge.
Yeah.
And you said that you are the masters of water technology.
Indeed.
So how are you working closely to do that here?
Yeah, so we have a very elaborate and comprehensive partnership with India on water. We cooperate not just with the central government, which is the Jal Shakti ministry, both when it comes to water supply, water distribution, wastewater, etc. Also with Mohua on the urban side.
Okay.
So that's at the central level. And then we have good cooperation with a number of states. We start out in Rajasthan, that are paired up with some of the Danish cities, but now expanding it also to Assam, to Tamil Nadu, and so on. So some of it has to do with providing safe, clean drinking water to India's population, basically the Rejuvenation mission, right? And I think what we can offer there, for example, is to reduce water loss. This is a huge problem in India, where you have 17% of the world's population, but you only have 3% of the world's water resources. That's going to be a problem going forward. And therefore, one of the things you need to do is to minimize the water loss. Today in India, of course, it varies from place to place, but many places you will have a water loss in the piping system of 30 to 40%. Denmark gets 3 to 4% or even less. So if you can bring that down, you can conserve your scarce water resources. It sounds technical, but it's going to be tremendously important for India. The second thing is what you talked about is more the pollution and how to clean that up. And Denmark there has I think also world-class experiences with the management of wastewater. We in that sense are not seeing ourselves as we have always been so great and good. We are perfectly happy talking about all the mistakes we made. And if you went to Denmark, like if you take a time machine, go back in history, and let's say you just arrived in Denmark in 1960, it's not so long ago, right? The harbor of Copenhagen would be seriously polluted.
Really?
An industrial harbor, floating with anything from wastewater to whatever. You shouldn't stick your finger in. Yeah.
I went in 2002 to Copenhagen, and Prime Minister Vajpayee had gone there. And I went there, and when you just said that Indian engineers sitting here about bridges, the first thing that struck me are the beautiful bridges there and the clean water. And I was like so envious at that time that I wish we could
it has
have
not always
bridges
been
like
the
this.
case, right? And I think that's the interesting point. Yeah.
Unimaginable,
The city where I studied, Aarhus, that's the second biggest city in Denmark. We had a river that ran through Aarhus, and at some point it was decided, I think in the 1950s, that this river would be you would simply put concrete on top of it, so it just ran underground, because it was stinking, dirty pool of wastewater, right? So you simply decided to close it. And then over time, of course, people started to realize this is no good, right? And then we developed, all kinds of both regulation and technologies to deal with this. Most importantly, to invest both in the sewer system and in wastewater treatment. And then today, this concrete has been taken away, and now the river is back to where it was, and it's beautiful and clean, and cafes have sprung up along the banks of the river, and you can sit there and enjoy. But again, you couldn't do that 50 years ago, right? It would be
I hope it doesn't take 50 years in India.
No, and it didn't take 50 years in Denmark. And of course, the advantage, and this is the whole point of the cooperation, no need for you to make the same mistakes, and you can leapfrog a lot of things by piggybacking on our trial and error over many years until
Ambassador, so many countries say this to us. I think I've heard Seoul had this same issue, dirty, stinky river. They cleaned it up. It's so beautiful. Singapore, it was a swamp-like situation. They cleaned it up. And so many of these countries
Israel is also doing that.
want to come and... Israel is water technology for different kind, turning it into... But here, the river passes through the city and it's so gorgeous. And... Indians who remember River Yamuna used to be like that. They used to go boating on it. Today, for at least my generation and the next generation, it's unimaginable that the Yamuna would ever be cleaned. And I hope in my lifetime, at least, we'll see a clean river, and cooperation with countries will result in that.
And going back to my first point about what is it then that we can offer, because of course you have other countries that have water technologies, you have other countries that develops renewable energy, but I think the unique value proposition we have is we will show you how to do it in a cost-efficient manner.
Okay.
And when it comes to water, let me give you one example of that. I was in Rajasthan recently, where we went to see some of those wastewater treatment plants. And what people maybe don't realize is that a wastewater treatment plant consumes an enormous amount of energy. In many municipalities, the same in Denmark or the US or elsewhere, if you're municipalities, your electricity bill, the biggest sort of cost you have there on your municipal electricity bill is the wastewater treatment plants. So what we have been good at is to find out how we can turn these wastewater treatment plants into energy consumers, from energy consumers into energy producers. So actually what happens is that you use the sludge in these treatment plants to produce biogas, and then suddenly the wastewater treatment no longer consumes a lot of electricity, hence it frees up funds for the municipality to invest in other things. But on top of that, it actually produces energy that you can feed back into the grid or produce biogas for consumers. So again, that means that the whole transition, the cost necessary to invest in these plants becomes much, much better. The business case improves. And that should enable more Indian cities, states to ramp that up faster. Because, of course, in this country, like in any other country, if you sit there, you're a local decision maker, you have to prioritize. Should we invest in education? Should we invest in pollution control? You cannot do it all. So the more you can do in a cost-efficient manner, the better. And I think that's what we are trying to inspire with. Yeah.
You've been to Rajasthan, and what are the other places that is on your bucket list? At least for the next 6 months, if you were to pick?
Yeah, the bucket list is very long. It's India, so I don't think, unfortunately, as a bucket list is something where you hope to achieve it before you die, and I'm not sure I'll make that list, no matter how hard I try.
Which is why I said 6 months.
Yeah, dude. But of course, needless to say, the first 6 months here, I focused a little bit on some of the geographies in India where we have significant Danish interest, and by that I mean either cooperation.
Tamil Nadu, I think.
So either strong cooperation with the local governments in the states, or significant Danish business presence. And Tamil Nadu is a good example. We came there historically 400 years ago, but even today, many Danish companies are there for manufacturing. But we also have strong cooperation on energy, water with the local government. Same goes for. Of course, for Karnataka, where we have a innovation center down there in Bangalore, also with posted staff from Denmark and so on, doing extremely well. Many Danish companies are present there. Maharashtra, Mumbai, Pune area, of course, also very important for us, and we've been there, and then finally maybe Gujarat. But next on my list, I hope I'll be in Kolkata next week, where we both to see the historic aspects of this, the Danish city of Serampore that was there until the 1840s. We sold it to the UK, but there was a trading post. But it was it's part of a heritage project that took 10 years to do, cooperation between the Danish National Museum and various Indian authorities. So it's been renovated, so you can see it as it looked like hundreds of years ago. So look forward to that. And then, of course, I'll be visiting many other places. I'll go to the northeast and other places.
Have you any favorites with food that? Are you experimentative at all as far as cuisine is concerned?
Certainly, and together with my team, we are actually trying to devise a plan where I will sort of, if not eat my way through India, at least make sure we try out the different kitchens. And of course, I'm really I love the fact that the diversity is so big that you go from one state or one geography to 50 kilometers. The food changes.
The language changes.
The language changes. So I think that's one of the appeals of being posted
but
here in India.
Are you fond of Indian food?
Yes, I like it.
You know,
very
it
much,
becomes very competitive on social media with all the ambassadors who are posted in India. Everybody's, I think,
Japanese,
the Japanese, the
German,
Germans, and now the
US.
Singaporean
Earlier,
ambassador.
yeah.
He goes everywhere and tries street food in India.
Yeah.
So they post these things, and then the other thing they do is these videos of celebrating
Dance.
Diwali and New Year with Indian music
Bollywood
and
numbers.
Bollywood numbers and stuff like that. So I think the Germans had the lead. In this first, and then soon to catch up were the Singaporeans.
Indeed, yeah.
Are you
So we
planning
looking
something
forward.
like that?
Tasting, huh?
Are you planning something like that when you say that with your team you are going to explore?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll try to do
Amp
some
up
of the
your social media presence.
Indeed.
Right. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for being part of the podcast.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to India-Denmark relations improving in the tenure that you're here. And hopefully we'll crack the FTA.
Yes, I am confident we will. We'll do our best at least. It's
Right.
as I said, it's a good opportunity for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you for watching or listening to this edition of the NI podcast with Smita Prakash. Do like or subscribe on whichever channel you have seen this or heard this. Namaste, Jai Hind. This episode is powered by easemytrip.com. Click here to watch the previous episodes.